Is N.T. Wright now disqualified as a Christian leader, teacher, and is his scholarship now even in question, all because of his recent comments on abortion? Now, admittedly, because of personal reasons, I am a little bit late to reacting to these sort of comments, and if you don't react straight away, sometimes you do miss the YouTube algorithm. But either way, I really wanted to jump on here and comment and see what you had to say about this in the comment section down below, because N.T. Wright is someone that I really do admire as a Christian leader and scholar. I have many of his books behind me, read many of them, watched a lot of his lectures on YouTube, and he really is a top-rate New Testament scholar and someone that we as Christians all look up to as someone who is a leader for us in the church. But is that now all done with? Do we have to throw away all of that? Because N.T. Wright has made some interesting comments on abortion. And I do have to admit, and I would love to get to know your thoughts, I do have to admit that I am very disheartened hearing N.T. Wright come out with these sort of comments, because we as Christians need strong Christian leaders to stand up to these sort of issues, and especially in the United Kingdom, especially in the Church of England, which N.T. Wright is clearly a part of, and he was very much a part of when he was the Bishop of Durham. Now, I couldn't actually find the original video, so I am going to react to this by watching Matt Walsh's reaction to this. I'm not going to watch Matt Walsh's reaction, but I'm going to use his clip, his YouTube channel, to react to the comments as well. So I'm going to share the screen, and I would love to get to know your thoughts as well. Is N.T. Wright now disqualified as a Christian leader? Has he disqualified himself, as Matt Walsh seems to suggest? So here we go. We're going to look at this, pause it, and let me know what you think.
When it's presented as you are killing, you are murdering an unborn child, I think we do have to be very, very careful. And I've had personal experience of this with a close family member where soon after the couple discovered that they were pregnant, or the wife was pregnant, then it also became apparent that the wife had been accidentally exposed to German measles, rubella. Now, as we know, that exposure to German measles can result in serious deformities in the womb, etc., etc. And the GP in that case was...
So I'm going to pause it there, and I did have a quick Google search, a quick research of what that is, German measles or rubella. And yes, it can cause, it's not guaranteed, I don't think, but it can cause potential birth defects if rubella is detected before 20 weeks. It's an early pregnancy sort of thing. If it's after 20 weeks, typically people say that the baby's okay, but if it's before that, it can lead to some deformities, deafness. It can lead to other things like that, some actual disabilities. But I couldn't find anywhere that seemed to explicitly state that it caused direct threats to the life of the child. So even here, we're quite on murky ground. That are we saying that disability is good reason to abort a child? What do we do with those very sweet children that have Down syndrome or other disabilities, even if it is just that they're deaf when they are born? If that's the only thing, perhaps in this situation where the rubella caused, would that be grounds for abortion? So even here, we're on murky territory. I think it was the CDC website that said in like a 10, 15, 20 year gap, there were only about half a dozen children that were affected from this. So it's a very, very rare occasion, like most situations like this are. I would think. But again, we are on pretty murky ground here if what we are saying is disabilities are a good reason to abort a child. Again, and unfortunately, if the conversation was just on this and debate surrounding this topic, I don't think there would have been as much controversy as there has been. But unfortunately, it does get a little bit worse.
Was a devout Christian GP, said we're going to do the tests, and if she has been exposed to rubella, if there's a threat of serious defamation or whatever, then we will recommend termination. And I remember my heart in my mouth when I heard that and thinking, do I really agree with that? But at the time, it was absolutely clear for the mental health, never mind anything else, of the mother and the potential father as well.
So here is the real beginnings of the problems I think people have been addressing with N.T. Wright's comments here. And again, we're not going to watch it, but Matt Walsh comments on this as well. N.T. Wright says that even for the sake of the mental health of the mother, let alone anything else. But unfortunately, what that leads to, of course, is the door opening up to really any reason for abortion, because you can boil down reasons for abortion. Mental health is always a part to play in that. It is mentally difficult for any woman to go through pregnancy, for someone that even wants the child or not. So to say that the mental health side of the mother is good grounds for abortion, what we're really risking there is a Christian leader saying that any reason for abortion is okay, because the mental health side is always a factor to play when you have an individual that is considering an abortion. That's always got to do with the mental health side of the mother. So yes, very much on murky ground here. And as a Christian leader and as a Christian, I don't think we can accept this sort of answer. So this was one of the disheartening comments that came from N.T. Wright.
That this was the way to go. In fact, all was well. The rubella had not actually done what it sometimes might do, and that child was born perfectly healthy and has grown up now, etc. This was a long time ago.
So again, this is Matt Walsh's YouTube channel. We're going to skip his comments here because we're going to want to comment ourselves and let me know what you think. So we're going to skip along to here.
Mother's health versus the health of the child, or whatever, and particularly that, as you cited, in cases of incest, there may be a very, very strong argument for saying this ought never to have happened, and with sorrow, because we do not want to do this in principle, but with sorrow and a bit of shame, the best thing to do is as soon as possible to terminate this pregnancy. This is not.
So I just wanted to comment on there, and I can't use exactly the words that he used because, as you see, sometimes YouTube likes to monitor that. So I'm going to use a more of a, I suppose, softer word, even though I clearly know the harsh realities of the situations that N.T. Wright is discussing here. Essentially, what he is saying is the typical, normal, moderate, conservative sort of view. We heard this a lot during the presidential campaign in the United States, where both J.D. Vance and President Donald Trump, especially J.D. Vance, who is someone who has been a little bit more outspoken on pro-life issues, taking the pretty standard view that has been there for a while. Even President Clinton in the 90s had this view that abortion is wrong, we should never do it, but in cases of violent sexual assault, there may be grounds that this is actually okay. So again, I think it was President Trump who said, I believe in the exceptions, and this is the standard sort of position that a lot of people are in, especially those that don't believe that abortion is right but try to take some sort of moderate stance. The only problem with that, well, not the only problem, because there are many problems with that, but the main problem is that that would be okay, I suppose, but unfortunately, we're missing the two things. We're missing the fact that it's still a human being, so you are taking away human life, which is always wrong, and that's a good enough answer in itself. But what I was trying to get at is there are many testimonies. This argument would be, I suppose, okay, but unfortunately not, because of many reasons. But one is because we have many testimonies of not only mothers that were sexually assaulted and kept the pregnancy, and it's actually been a wonderful experience for them having the child. It was an awful experience the way that the child was conceived, obviously. But actually, the child itself was a part of the healing process, which is contrary to what we see, right? The argument is, well, you have to be okay with it because when the mother looks into the eyes of the child, they're just going to think about the way that the child was conceived. They're going to think about the father. Actually, we've had a lot of evidence to suggest that that's not the case. Then, in fact, the abortion has actually caused more harm mentally and physically than the person actually keeping the child. That child has actually been a source of hope and healing for that person. And we've also had testimonies of people today that have grown up and said, yes, my mother was and had me. And I am so thankful that my mother didn't decide to abort me, because I wouldn't be here today. So unfortunately, we're missing that side of the argument. I understand that we do have to be sensitive in these areas because it's an awful situation to deal with. But I think what we do is we think that the abortion is a quick healing fix for the mother, when we don't realize actually it causes more harm, more problems, and we also miss the beauty of the healing that takes place when that mother takes the right and brave decision to keep the child. There is so much healing in that. And you see the wonderful redemption that is there, that God does, the healing and the redemption through an awful situation. And my goodness, isn't that what our God does? I feel like this is the art. This is the. I'm not saying that I'm more high and mighty and more intelligent than N.T. Wright, obviously not. But I feel like that sort of forming of the answer would have been such a better way of doing it. Let's continue and let's see what else N.T. Wright has to say.
Not something which we should welcome. It is not something which we should collude with. At the same time, there may be certain exceptions, of which severe deformity might be one, of which certainly incest and would be others. And in those cases, I would say the sooner the better, because at a certain point, and I am not medically qualified to say at what point I would draw a line, then this is a viable human being that should then be cherished. So the whole debate.
So there's a couple things here. I did want to just mention one other thing, which is, that's kind of annoying to look at that. There you go. Just wanted to pause that. So two things. First of all, to go back to the disability argument here, I was just thinking about another reason why that could be very dangerous, and who is making that decision, right? Who is defining what severe deformity is? Is Down syndrome severe deformity? Is deafness severe deformity? Where do we draw that line? And who is making that decision? And I'm sure you would have different opinions of where you would draw that line. So then you're getting into the ground of whether it's a human being, a doctor, who's ultimately making that decision. And a doctor then is making the decision of whether a human being should live or whether a human being should die because of deformity. Well, what if an adult comes into the hospital with a severe deformity? Would the doctor be on good reason to withdraw treatment or care because that person has a severe deformity? Really, if we say that a human being in the womb is a human being, is the same physical human being as someone outside of the room, we are then getting even into further murky ground and murky territory there. But also, on this argument here, that not only are we talking about the deformity debate, but we're talking about when are we medically qualified to say whether a human being is a human or not? And I'm very disappointed to hear that N.T. Wright doesn't think that he is qualified to say when a human being is viable or not. Of course, if he's not qualified to do that, then really no grounds should be okay for abortion, because if he's not sure, then shouldn't we err on the side of caution and suggest that actually it's a human being at any point in time? I mentioned earlier that I had some personal reasons why I haven't been recording. That's because we just welcomed our second child, our second daughter. She's now just over 2 months old. And at the very beginning of this pregnancy, unfortunately, we had a bit of a threatened miscarriage scare. And we thought that we actually lost the baby, but luckily all was well. We were praying and believing God that he was going to sustain this pregnancy and heal anything that needed to be healed. And I see my 2-month-old daughter today, and I look at her, and I realized that if there was an actual miscarriage, she wouldn't be here today. So the logical conclusion is, of course, that once we found out, and it was very early on, it was about 4 or 5, or maybe getting on to 6 weeks, that we had this threatened miscarriage. If that did actually if we actually did have a miscarriage, my daughter wouldn't be here today. Well, if you terminate a pregnancy at 4 weeks, the child isn't here today. If you do it before that, the child isn't here today. So, okay, if you get into the real nitty-gritty of the scientific terminology, that may be the case that at the exact millisecond moment when the sperm penetrates the egg, okay, At that exact moment, it may not be a formed human being. It may take a couple of seconds or hours or whatever. But the reason why we say as Christians that life begins at conception is because that is the moment, that is the very moment that we begin the chain reaction of new DNA forming and therefore a new identity forming, a new person that is made in the image of God. And what's really bothering me with this whole thing is that as a Christian leader, as somebody who knows the Bible in and out, and N.T. Wright does, there was no reference of Scripture. There was no reference that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that we are designed, knitted together in our mother's womb. That in the context of Jeremiah, okay, but I think we can use this scripture in a broad version in the first chapter of Jeremiah, when Jeremiah is saying to God, oh, why are you sending me? I'm not qualified. I can't speak. And God says, no, before I even formed you in the womb, I knew you. So, wow, God knew that this person was going to come into the world. So he must know that even before a person is formed in the womb, God knows them. And if we're made in the very image and likeness of God, then surely we can say that life begins at conception. That's my argument there. Let me know what you think down below. Let's finish what NTI has to say here.
Women's rights, it's very difficult. It's very hard for a man to talk about this. And indeed, one of the problems has been, particularly in the Roman Catholic Church, when women, particularly, say, a girl who's been or who's had incest committed on her, then discovering that unmarried men from the Catholic hierarchy are telling her what she can and can't do. That's as people now say, the optics of that are pretty bad. That's part of the same system of male bullying, which we have to avoid like the plague.
I really don't like that argument. The argument here is because myself as a man and any other man in the world, we are disqualified as even talking about abortion because it's a woman's issue and that's it. And only women can talk about it. And anything that a man has to say is automatically disqualified. It's automatically rejected because you're a man. I mean, I'm not even going to get into the philosophical reasons why that is completely wrong. But I think I just wanted to make this point. Men actually need to stand up and talk about this issue. Not because they're not forcing women to have pregnancies or they're not forcing people and young women to have pregnancies and well, where is the man in this? Exactly. Where is the man in this? Where are the men in this? Where are the men who are taking some leadership? Where are the men who are supporting women? Where are the men who are saying women can have children and their life is not over? If a woman gets pregnant at 18, 19, it doesn't mean they can't get their college degree. It doesn't mean that they don't have to have a are the men in this situation. Men actually should be very much outspoken about this issue because they should be, one, supporting women, and two, encouraging women to say, no, you are strong, you can do this. And ultimately, that is the most feminist position to be in. Women can do this. They can have a career if they want to and be a mum. My mum worked her entire life. She still does work bringing me up. She still is an accountant. My mum went to work. And yet she still brought me up in a great way. I still felt love and affection and a care from her. And she wasn't any less of a woman or any less of a mother because she had to do that. She went out. I think she would prefer that she didn't, and that's another argument. That's another question for another day. But she went out and did it. And she is a great example. And there are many other great examples of women doing that. So men should absolutely, they have a right to talk about this, but they should absolutely be talking about this because they should be out there leading as leaders and encouraging women that they can do this. But is N.T. Wright disqualified as a Christian leader and a Christian teacher? It's hard for me to say that. I don't think I agree with the argument that this puts his scholarship in question. I think there are still many, many things to benefit from reading N.T. Wright's books and listening to his lectures, especially when he's talking about the New Testament and the history of Second Temple Judaism. I think it is just some of the best stuff that's out there. And to say that all of that stuff is now disqualified and we have to reject that because of these unfortunate comments. I don't think that's right. And I think that we can still listen to N.T. Wright and still read his books and still enjoy his lectures, even now, and lectures from the past. But it is an unfortunate reminder that Christian leaders really, really are not doing enough to stand up to culture, especially in the United Kingdom. And I think I'm going to make a separate video on a plea for the Church of England to really get that act together, because we really need that, especially in the UK, but really worldwide. We need Christian leaders to stand up to these issues, to not be afraid of being cancelled, not being afraid of what other people may think of us, but really stand on the truth. And if our Christian leaders aren't doing that, then really it is a reflection of where we are failing as a church right now. But that is why we need, as everyday Christians, to become Christian leaders, to get to that point and to stand up for these really important issues, because it's the truth. And that's what we are commanded to do in Scripture. Jesus has commanded us to teach and preach the truth. So let me know what you think down below. Is N.T. Wright now disqualified? Are you still going to listen to him? Let me know what you think of my thoughts and my reaction. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video.